Fun fact, this is my third session recording this video. Hey, we normally don't do videos quite like this on the channel, but I have a bit of a thesis I'd like to flesh out in video form. Just because a team wins does not automatically make them better than their opponent. Meaning the best team and the team that wins the championship can sometimes be two different things. That to me is a beautiful thing about sports and competition itself. Of course you want to win, and that's always the end goal, but sometimes you should recognize a team that didn't for how good they really were. I developed this take a while back, and it's actually become a lot more divisive among people I know, so I'm using this video as a way to articulate it. You're literally getting a persuasive essay from me like it's 6th grade again. Either you agree with my general sentiment right now, or you don't. But no matter where you lie, all I ask is that you hear me out. Allow me to explain why a team winning isn't always what decides if they're better. Because there are just too many examples of teams that were more talented and fell to seemingly less talented opponents. But before we go any further, some quick housekeeping. Our analytics tell us that under 20% of you watching are subscribed. So if you'd like to stay in the loop for when we put out new sports content, click that red subscribe button down below. Now, back to the video. I'm gonna set a major ground rule right off the bat. One game samples don't count. Anything can happen in one game. So no March Madness, no fights, no Super Bowl. Nothing that lasts just one game. The argument is going to be limited to proving that a team can win a series and still not be, quote, better. Or that at the very least, just looking at who won doesn't always tell the full story. Because winning isn't everything. I'm pretty sure I've had this take since Teen Titans taught me this lesson at 4 years old though, but yeah.
Be proud and cheerful, Robin. You competed well.
Winning isn't everything.
Alright, enough of the build-up. Let's start for real. The argument gets proven most commonly by one of two possibilities that explain how a better team can lose even in a series. And their legacy will suffer as a result when the talent this team put forth could get unfairly forgotten. One of these two is usually within team control, and the other tends not to be. The thing that usually is controllable is matchups. Sometimes, a less talented group can survive with teams above their pay grade based on roster matchups. I'm sure you've heard before that one team, quote, matches up well with another for whatever reason. If you don't believe me, I have two examples of really good teams losing playoff series this year because of personnel matchups. The first is the New York Yankees. You could realistically argue that any one of the Yankees' top 5, maybe top 6 or 7 hitters would instantly be the best hitter on the Tampa Bay Rays if they got traded there or something. And the Yankees have an ace pitcher who has been climbing higher than the Rays' best starting pitchers. And the Yankees' bullpen has some notoriously untouchable arms in its back end. But the Yankees lost. Want to know why? The Rays employ a lot of pitchers with devastating right-handed sliders. The Yankees lineup consists of many right-handed hitters who have shown a weakness for right-handed sliders. From the Rays' view, that's a combination for success more obvious than ice cream and cake. No wonder the Rays just kept sending out seemingly unproven guys with exactly that strength to neutralize the deadly Yankee lineup. You might counter by saying the Rays won more games this year than the Yankees facing the same team, so they're better anyway. But the Yankees were very banged up for most of this year, and never really had a chance to all be healthy for the regular season. The big guns were there in the playoffs though. This proven and absurdly talented group was here, and they lost. Props to the Rays, of course. They're a tremendous team and a tremendous organization, but that's the beauty of sports. Teams that have better collections of guys sometimes lose. I did promise one more example of this coming to light in 2020, and I'll raise you the Milwaukee Bucks versus Miami Heat playoff series from this past year. The Bucks went 56-17 in the NBA regular season, led by Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is very good at basketball, and also very funny.
Knock knock. Obama.
Obama who?
Obama so. Come on, man.
Giannis was the best player in basketball during the regular season, and was recognized as such with his second straight MVP award. Him being good enough to win an MVP is where this clip you guys all made memes out of came from. The Bucks' second best player was Chris Middleton, who put up comparable numbers to the Heat's best player, Jimmy Butler. But the Heat beat the Bucks in just 5 games in the bubble. Why? Milwaukee was 15th in the NBA in opponent three-point shooting percentage, meaning they weren't all that special at defending threes. Miami was the best team in the East and 4th best team in the entire NBA in three-point shooting percentage. Also, Milwaukee was just 17th in shooting threes, and Miami was 5th in defending them. Miami's strength directly overlapped with the giant of the conference's weakness. They had the opportunity to control the flow of threes, and did exactly that. Usually, at least one of Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, or Goran Dragic popped off in that series, and Milwaukee struggled to cover both Miami guards on the floor at the same time. Those three are not nearly the players Giannis and Chris Middleton are, but they didn't need to be. The Heat shot 37.3% from three in the series. The Bucks only shot 32.7%. The Bucks had a more star-driven team that won much more in the regular season, but the Heat brought in some snipers to slay the dragon in front of them because that's where the matchup advantage was. That made the difference well before Giannis got hurt in the series, which is the perfect segue into the next thing that can explain why a better constructed team could end up losing. Pure bad luck. The most common way bad luck can hurt a team in sports is through injuries, and I'll use the 2006 New York Mets as a representative example of this. The 2006 Mets were, without a doubt, the best team in baseball. They had the best blend of pitching and hitting in the league, and cruised through baseball that year. Then the injuries piled up, particularly on the pitching staff. Pedro Martinez and Orlando Hernandez, two of the Mets' best pitchers and all-time funny men, hurt. Dwayner Sanchez, a key arm in the back end of their bullpen, hurt. In a taxicab accident. They were so depleted on the mound that the starting pitcher in their first playoff game was, to put it nicely, unproven. But it almost didn't matter. The team made it all the way to Game 7 of the NLCS against an 83-78 St. Louis Cardinals team. The Cardinals had just one non-Albert Pujols starter in their everyday lineup who was more than 10% better than league average by OPS+. And their pitching was simply not getting it done that year either. The Cardinals were more games above 500 in the playoffs than they were in the entire regular season, and won the World Series along the way. But it took every ounce of strength and clutch timing they had to beat a Mets team that was maybe at 75% strength. Were the Mets a better team than the Cardinals? Probably, especially if they had all their pieces. But that's not how the record books will see it. I talked to a friend about this take a while back, and when I used a baseball example in it, their counter was that pitchers change every game. So there's more game-to-game variability and the chance for one isolated guy to take control of an entire series. Because I just cited an example that involved banged-up pitching, I'm gonna stop using baseball examples from here on out, just to show how deep this goes. Pitching matchups can sometimes create unequal circumstances in games, and if you think that invalidates this theory, I'll play by your rules just to further prove this point. The best way to analyze this way of thinking in a vacuum are sports where, generally speaking, the players don't change much from game to game. So it's, in theory, the exact same people facing off each game. And even with that, better teams have still lost. Plenty of times. There's also bad luck that doesn't involve injuries. 1997 NBA playoffs. The Knicks are playing the Heat. These two teams were very similar. Hard to say which one was definitively better coming in, especially if you do a deep dive on their numbers. They matched up in a best-of-7 series that year with a lot on the line. The Knicks took a 3-1 series lead, and then at the end of Game 5, this happened.
P.J. Brown throws Charlie Ward. Watch out. This one's going to get really ugly.
Nice wrestling move, man. This fight obviously led to suspensions. Let's look at the allocation of players suspended by team. PJ Brown started this by pulling a Mortal Kombat move, so yeah, he probably should have gotten suspended. How many guys on the Knicks got suspended? Whoa! These guys all started for the Knicks, and John Starks was consistently playing 25 to 30 minutes per game at that point too. The Knicks suited up just 9 players in Game 6, and only lost by 5 points. In Game 7, the Knicks needed to start a rookie who averaged under 12 minutes per game that year. Easy to guess, but they lost. The Heat won in large part because the Knicks were disproportionately affected by the suspensions from that fight. Does winning that series automatically make that Heat team better than that Knicks team? I really don't think it does in this case. We may never really know who the quote better team was, and that fight pretty much robbed us of finding out. Just looking at who won the series isn't always enough. The team that won 3 of the first 4 games was literally not there for games 6 and 7. That Knicks team really got the short end of the stick, and still almost pulled out that win, absurdly understaffed at the end. So those are some possible explanations for why a better team could lose, even in a series. But that doesn't mean those are the end-all be-all reasons for why this can happen. If you're still not seeing it, here are some more examples of less talented teams coming up with upset series wins. Teams like these show why sports are so great. The 1993-94 San Jose Sharks were in their 3rd year ever of being a hockey team, and the first 2 years were just terrible. They were so bad that you would literally get an extra reward if you won the Stanley Cup with them in NHL Hockey 92. Oh, not much of a special reward there. In year 3, they started to make some progress though. The Sharks snuck into the playoffs as an 8 seed. What made the difference for them to finesse a spot over the number 9 team was that they had 16 ties that year. In North American sports, we don't love ties all that much. So great, the Sharks were going to be in the playoffs. Their first round matchup was the Detroit Red Wings, the best team in the NHL West. They were the only team to average more than 4 goals per game that season, and were led by the league's most valuable player, Hart Trophy winner Sergei Fedorov. And there were games in this series where the Red Wings just crushed the Sharks, demonstrating their obvious superiority multiple times. A 7-1 Red Wings win in Game 6 of the series gave every impression that the Red Wings would take Game 7 at home exactly as they were expected to. But that never happened. The Sharks stole the series with their 3rd win by just 1 goal. A team that wasn't even really supposed to be there took down the number 1 team in the conference. They lost in the next round though, and never climbed any higher in the NHL playoffs for another 10 years. The Red Wings went to the Stanley Cup the next year, and won back-to-back titles in 1997 and 98 with mostly the same core of players. The future proved that the Red Wings were the better team, which is what makes the Sharks win so remarkable. I'm sure you remember the 73-9 Warriors team. For most of the season, they were looking at being the best team of all time. They did it at home, they did it on the road, they did it with their coach missing half the season, and they could score from anywhere at any time. This team was incredible, and most of the time, their wins weren't even close. You remember this team, not because they capped it off with a win in the 2016 NBA Finals, but because they blew a 3-1 lead and LeBron's career came full circle. That series was great, but you may not remember that Golden State washed the first 2 games, or that Draymond Green was suspended for Game 5 because his habit caught up with him. Green being out may have mattered more than you think, as he was the Warriors' best player by far in Game 7, and more than held his own in Game 6. Even so, Draymond missed just 1 game, albeit an extremely important one. Down the stretch, the Warriors had their chance, and failed. They fell apart in just about every way. But does that loss automatically make Cleveland a better team top to bottom? The full story clouds that, and everything they did before as the clear class of the NBA should not get erased. One more story. This one's from the NFL. I know, I said no 1-game samples. And to that I say,
watch this.
The 2004 Arizona Cardinals were okay. They had Larry Fitzgerald, Anquan Bolden, Emmitt Smith, and a good defense led by a Pro Bowl starter on their D-line. The 2004 49ers had a Pro Bowler too, their long snapper. They didn't have any others because they were awful. The 2004 49ers were 30th in offense, 32nd in defense, and finished with a record of 2-14. Both of their wins were against the Cardinals. Both of them were also in overtime, by a field goal. Both games were great, and both teams had clear opportunities to win. The 49ers just happened to win a coin toss in both overtimes and took both games, sweeping the season series. The Cardinals finished 6-10 in real life, but if they won those 2 games against the 49ers, they would have actually made the playoffs thanks to a tiebreaker over the Vikings. It would be really tough to argue that the 49ers were better than the Cardinals that year, even though they beat them multiple times. I want to make this very clear. I am not trying to discredit any of the teams I'm saying weren't as good that won. In fact, I'm doing the exact opposite. Underdog wins are so special because a team pulled out a win against an opponent who was really much more equipped to win. David beating Goliath is so special because Goliath is Goliath. It's much more of an accomplishment to take down a bigger final boss at the end. But at the same time, it should be recognized that the Goliath was, for all intensive purposes, superior. At the very least on paper. Maybe you think I'm just a nut on the internet, and you might not be wrong, but hear me out for one final idea. Shaq and Kobe won 3 championships together with the Lakers, but they also played in 2 Western Conference Finals Game 7s. The first was against a Trailblazers team led by Rasheed Wallace and 34-year-old Scottie Pippen. The second was against the Chris Webber and Peja Stojakovic-led Kings. The Lakers just scratched by those 2 teams, but pretend they didn't. Would the narrative be that Rasheed Wallace or Chris Webber were legends as good as Shaq and Kobe? Probably not, because we could see with our eyeballs that Shaq, Kobe, and their team were the best in the game at that time. Or would it be that the Lakers choked? Knowing what we know about sports fans, the first narrative to come out would probably revolve around the Lakers choking. And choking means that a better team, or one in a clear position to win, didn't. Winning is not black and white. It's not as simple as winning inherently makes you better, because winning isn't everything, and it's not the only thing that matters. Sure, it's the tangible end goal everyone strives for, but it's deeper than that, and plenty of great teams never did it. You can put together the perfect team and still lose, because that's the great thing about sports. That's why we have and love upsets and underdog stories. That's part of what makes sports so special. That's why people always love these games.
But it's real, cause I rock the stages in my spare time. Soon the crowd gon' recite my lyrics every damn line. And I mean that, packing the room, I know they seen that. My passion and my pain on display, Peslow a mean cat. And I'm hungry still walking through the street. Gold focus chillin' as I'm nodding to these beats. Hope the people give me payment if they wanted me to speak.